It is.
We're going to go live in 5 seconds, so we'll...
Rangatira, tēnā koutou, kano tahaere ko tai mai nei, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, kia ora, great to have you with us back on Te Mangai, our podcast and live feed show to Facebook. So for those listening in today, kia ora, welcome, great to have you. This week on Te Mangai, our special guest is the co-leader of the Greens Party, Marama Davidson. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Oh, kia ora. It's wonderful to have you with us here on Te Mangai, where we each week hear stories of people's lives, how they've used mātauranga rawa or whakamana, things in their life to improve their life. And of course, it's all about te ira tangata, improve quality of life. And looking forward to hearing your story tonight. So usually we just start off with a bit of a whakawhanaungatanga. So kia ora.
Tēnā koe, tēnā koutou.
So where are you from?
He mokopuna tēnei o te taitokero, o ngā iwi o Te Rarawa me ngā puhi, whakawhiti atu ki te tai rāwhiti, no Te Araroa tōku māma, no reira, ko hukurangi te maunga, ko Waiapu te awa. So,
whananga.
Ai, ko au tēnei, yes.
Hukurangi.
Hukurangi Waiapu and Whetu Matarau, of course. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. My grandmother used to put the corn in that river.
Oh, beautiful.
So our whare, Hutana whare, was right next to Waitakio. Oh, our one was Waitakio, further down.
Oh, yes.
And Waima.
Yeah.
And she put corn in the river there, and she used to love it, and everyone else hated it.
Oh, I've had some kangapito on the coast, yes. And my mother currently lives on the Waiapu riverbank in Ruatoria, where she has lived for probably nearly 20 years, I think. So very much rooted in both the East Coast and up in the north.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Well, look, it's great to have you with us tonight, and many of our listeners and viewers are looking forward to hearing a bit about you. You know, we'll get into the nitty politically gritty, but really interested to hear your whakapapa.
Okay.
You know, where you come from, and
sure.
So where did you grow up?
All around Aotearoa, in the city and in the Wop-Wops. Yeah, and so I was very lucky to have lived and gone to school in Wellington, Dunedin and Christchurch and Auckland. Otara, we hail from Otara. We're part of the Māori movement that came down to the cities in sort of the 50s and 60s.
Oh, same as us. We came to Newton here, Newton Gully, and then we went out to Howick.
Yeah, we're part of all of that, and so
Urban Drift,
Urban Drift, 4 generations in Otara, and so. But I then also got the deep privilege of growing up in Hokianga, in Whirinaki and Opanoni, where I'm from, and my grandfather is buried in Whirinaki, and my grandmother is buried in Motukaraka. So I'm on both. I straddle the Hokianga Harbour. And I've also spent some time living in Ruatoria and had my son, who's now 10, in Te Puia Hospital in Ruatoria. Wow. So I've lived all around the motu. Yeah. Yeah,
that's where our father was born.
In Te Puia?
Yeah. And then moved out when we Granny and Nana Pop brought them up in the 1950s. Yeah.
Oh, so wow. Was,
I think Dad was 3 then or something.
I feel really lucky because I've had both the urban Māori experience and the Wop Māori experience, and being connected to my maunga and my awa, and growing up with that connection and taking it for granted, actually, and taking it for granted and thinking that all Māori have that connection to their tūranga waiwai, and that how much of a resource, how much of a rawa that is for me in everything I do, is that connection to both of my tūranga waiwai in the north and in the east coast, and realising now how much that informs my work.
Well, it's interesting too for us as being brought up as urban Māori, away from our tūranga waiwai, the pictures and the stories we cherish them. Yeah, I know I do. I cherish them so deeply, and personally, to inform who I am and what I do. So interesting. So you got to sort of experience it in the space where we get to go back and visit.
Yes.
And then
and it's what I'm trying to do with my tamariki now, who haven't grown up in those spaces, and I'm actively trying to reconnect them so that they have the same sense of belonging that I do to their whakapapa.
Oh, cool. So I read your bio a little bit about your parents. Tell us a little bit. You're interesting. So because they were sort of quite active, activists.
They were part of they were part of the young teenage. Actually, they met. This is my story. They met as teenagers on the steps of Parliament, standing up for
romantic?
I know. Well, activism is a turn on, apparently. I was literally born from it. The passion on the streets has taken off the streets as well. I was literally born into activism from my young teenage urban Māori parents who met on the steps of Wellington as part of the Te Reo and Māori land marches in the 70s.
Well, I've got to ask a question. What was that like?
So it was all I knew. It was all I knew, and it meant that when we were in Dunedin, where there weren't, sometimes we were the only Māori at our school in Dunedin, in places where there weren't, very different from Otara, it often meant that my young, let's say, passionate parents were in arguments and debates with their Pākehā neighbours, standing up for mana motuhake and tino rangatiratanga.
And all the cars in the driveway during the tangi, eh?
All of that sort of stuff, and seen my dad a lot with the megaphone on rallies and hikoi, and that was a very normal part of my childhood. And knowing that my parents would not sit silence when there was injustice, right? And so that was normal.
Sorry, just chiming in there. So what's that about? What was driving them in terms of that passion to activism and representation?
They were part of that whole sort of Māori Renaissance, young urban Māori who had been disconnected from their language and their land, and were feeling that mamae, were feeling that sense of loss, and were feeling the sense of injustice of colonisation, and had seen what their grandparents and parents had gone through, learnt that their parents had had te reo beaten out of them in schools, and started feeling the sense of injustice about all of that, and we're not going to sit down and shut up about it. And a lot of that whole generation of Māori, that was the Ngā Tamatoa days, which my father was a part of. We've got them to thank for so much of what we've got today.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you hear that a lot on the marae, in the wharekaia. Those stories are still very strong in people's lives.
Well,
and that work did really in terms of making us sort of find our way or re-establish our way.
Absolutely.
Because we were already here, but
it's
just that re-establishing of our identity.
It was some claiming back. And so if we remember, the te reo movement was, and the reason why we have everything we've got today was because of that generation who had been ripped away from their own language, whose mothers and fathers had refused to speak it to them, and they knew that was wrong. So they fought for us to get it back.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges, Ngata really pushed that ideal. And I know on my grandmother, and she was very close to him, and he, that sort of thing. Keep your heart to Māori, but give your head to the Pākehā. There's a whakatauki there. She did that. Right. And yet, here's Nan and Pop fighting in te reo, and as soon as they opened the car door, everything was in English.
Yes.
Same. As soon as that car door shut, Nan was telling Pop off in the reo, and then opened the door. No, don't you speak that reo, boy.
I remember sitting around the kitchen table in my Nana's place in Otara, Hamel Road in Otara. Wow. She would only speak te reo to her siblings and to her generation, and wouldn't speak a word of it to any of us. But I remember now thinking how beautiful it was to listen to their ancient reo.
Oh, so fast
so
too,
beautiful.
Oh.
Beautiful.
Oh, okay. So that's you in the early years, sort of learning to stand in the space and advocate on social issues for Māori. And environment. Yeah,
and understanding that they're all the same issues in Te Ao Māori, understanding that There is no whenua without people, there is no people without whenua. And so when we were standing for our whenua, we were standing for mokopuna who haven't yet arrived. I mean, some of the nannies on the East Coast, one of their visions is that we should do minimum 100-year planning, minimum, because we should all be operating, and this is the mātauranga aspect of what drives me in my work, is that knowledge from our kuikui and our whaia and our koka, when they say we should be planning our connection with our whenua and our wai and our maunga and our ngahere in a way that protects them for future generations to come. It's pretty simple, really, but we haven't been doing that as a world. We haven't been doing that.
Yeah. Oh, look, I also just want to acknowledge Honi Waititi, also Papakura and Urban Marae, out in Hunua there. But I mean, we grew up in West Auckland, so Honi Wai,
our Urban Marae.
Well, I remember Dad taking the whānau to the opening.
Otara.
Whaiora and Otara. We've got, these beautiful places to stand and express ourselves and talk about our issues. And I remember Dad dragging me and Greg along to Honi Wai there, and the day it opened, and I still remember the 20 hangi pits.
Yeah, it was our first day. Honi Waititi Marae was our first urban sort of pan.
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah, and the real pro real advocacy there. I think a lot of firsts, and they continue to do a great job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we just acknowledge them for their space and sort of pushing those things along, eh? Yeah. So, okay, so we've got that. Tell us a little bit your education. So
oh my goodness!
Yeah.
So that's
what's that about? Why
and
did
that's
you do
a
that?
political definition. What is education? So I went to school, and I was a little bit of a nerd in these mainstream Pākehā education schools. I was a little bit nerdy, so I was able to achieve, which was hilarious because my radical parents, my activist parents, often used to scorn at me with all the homework and think, that's far too much homework for a growing child. They hated
I know what you mean.
Hey, right? They were like, why do you want to be sitting down doing homework? That's not an education. They hated us wearing uniforms to look all the same. They were really it offended their sensibilities for us, so they kept it real. They knew that taking us out of school for times of other education was just as important as being in school. So we would go on trips. We would take the day off to celebrate Shakespeare's birthday. And we thought that was a national public holiday.
Did you say Shakespeare?
Yeah, my dad, of course, was just a performer and loved performing arts.
Oh, wow.
And so I achieved in school. I went to Auckland University and Waikato University, did my degrees, and I did a post-bachelor's, graduate degree at Te Wānanga o Aotearoa as well.
Oh, wow.
So I've had all of that privilege, but I have to say some of my other worldly education and awareness and political learning came from being involved in supporting activism groups, social and environmental justice campaigns and kaupapa.
Wow.
And just sitting and listening and learning from those people, those community grassroots leaders fighting for our people and our planet has been where the other part of my education has come from.
Oh, awesome. And so you've got some children. Are they following in your footsteps?
So I've got 3 growing young women who are all in their 24, 22 and 21.
Oh, cool.
And I've got 3 at primary school, 12, 10 and 9. And they're amazing and fantastic. And I often say fantastic despite me. But they're amazing. And they've known all their lives what my passion and commitment and work has been about, and I've tried to involve them as much as possible. But now, as a public figure, they also can get very whakamā about being seen next to me. They also try to protect their private lives as well, which I really respect and understand. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well, no, awesome. All right, so I was sort of just running off a few questions here. I do want to come back to the 100-year plan, though. We'll come back to that one in a minute. But first, so what's the defining moment that sort of directed you into you've gone into politics.
Yeah.
You're now the co-leader, which is really exciting.
I've never dreamt of that.
Yeah, but sort of maybe if you could just share with us a little bit about sort of what was maybe a few defining moments.
There are a few. There's never just one moment. I guess one defining moment is being born into parents who met on the steps of Parliament, and somehow I've ended up on the steps of Parliament on the other side. But I think also having an ingrained sense of justice and injustice from my parents was also going to end up, I was going to be a waha mangai, nui. And working at the Human Rights Commission for 10 years, I think, is another of background to my political career, because I started to develop a sense of having a voice on issues. And as I got, and with other Māori women, we founded a collective where we would support each other, because we realised that there were too few Māori women voices being given a platform on any issues. Issues. If you watched all the media programs on television, if you listened to the radio, very few Māori women having given a platform. And so we just created our own platforms. We wrote blogs, we sent out media releases, and very soon we were starting to be asked to share our voices much more.
You didn't wait to be invited?
We didn't wait. We just got our voices out there.
You're going to have a go?
Because everything is related to whānau Māori. Every political issue is related to whānau Māori. So why wouldn't you feature wahine Māori voices in all of those political issues? And so we
especially as New Zealand had, what was it, the first mayor in the world or something?
The first
woman mayor
is
in the
that
world.
Right? I'm not.
Came out of Tamaki Makaurau. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic!
So there you go.
Yeah. So, and also the absence of wahine Māori voices is to our detriment. So now we're seeing more and more wahine Māori speak up, which is fabulous.
Yeah, we've got one leading the country.
I don't know how that happened, but it has happened that I became a co-leader, and that has been an incredible, humbling opportunity, and I hope I can do the best with it that I possibly can.
How are you finding it?
Full on. So it's been, 4 months, I think, nearly, and I feel like I've been doing it for 5 years. It's full on. Still sort of finding my feet, but I hope to be a powerful voice for our people and our planet, at the very, very least. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some things that you're working on at the moment?
Goodness gracious. So politically, the Green Party needs to be very clear that we have to deliver what we said we would do, and that's our confidence and supply agreement. And so my priority is to deliver all the things we said we would do, which include things like establishing a rent-to-own and progressive home ownership plan for those who will never have a shit show of raising a deposit and owning a home. Many are Māori.
Which is most of us.
And Pacific whānau.
Aye.
And so I have the housing, water, Māori development, sports and recreation, Pacific peoples, ethnic and migrant communities portfolios, and our children. So I have some big take there. And
just a few.
Yeah, and so I'm prioritising different things in each of those portfolios. But the political work is, as a non-ministerial co-leader, is also to maintain the Greens' point of difference. We need more of us in Parliament if we're going to have a real commitment to environment, to people, and to long-term future. And so that's part of my work
Kia ora.
as well.
I'd like to just do a little shout-out here on that. My first, and forgive me for my ignorance, my first political meeting was coming last year to the Greens Party Environmental Policy in Mount Eden. We went along and we came, and actually I shook your hand, but you wouldn't have remembered me from that night. But what really blew me away was just the policies around environment. And I have to confess, I was ignorant. I only went off what I read from the Herald,
Right.
which is only really about a half to a third of the reality,
Yeah.
and a somewhat tainted perspective the other time. So I got increasingly frustrated. So I just came along to have a listen,
ka pai.
and it really impacted me and everyone in the room. Of course, that was probably the last time I was at Maturier. Stood and then hello, here we are tonight.
Yeah,
and you're
that's
now
right.
the co-leader. But I was really struck that night. The difference of turning up, being in the room, feeling the wairua. There was a real. It was genuine. We
Yeah.
could believe what the Greens, what you were putting forward
Yeah.
around protection of the environment and the enhancement of the environment. In fact, so much so, my wife went out and bought a what do you call it?
An electric car.
Electric car, eh, Greg?
Oh,
And
wow.
Steve's got an electric bike now.
Oh,
out
I
and
want
bought
one.
it,
I want an electric bike.
And I have an
We
electric
can get you
bike.
sorted.
And
We can get you sorted. out.
Electric
That's something
bike.
good.
I had my first ride on one recently, and I'm sold.
Yeah, well, so I go from West Auckland to Unitec where I lecture.
Fantastic.
37 kilometres an hour this thing does.
Fantastic.
And I can still cycle my brains out, get a sweat up, and but it's going 37 kilometres an hour on the flat. It's amazing.
I work just around the corner. We're near K Road. I work just around the corner in the Greens Issues
I know where you
office.
are.
Yeah,
Yeah,
on
you're just
Mercury.
here.
Yeah, Mercury Lane. I would cycle and train from Manurewa into the city.
Aye.
Cycle and train, and on my old Pakaru bike, but. As
10
soon as
speed.
but as soon as I hopped on an electric bike, I realised that this would make that actually enjoyable because
Well,
I'm not fit.
Join the club.
Yeah, so actually, I would want a bike everywhere.
Yeah. Well, we'll get you sorted.
Yeah,
The one
we
I've got
need
some
to.
Magnum from Brown Spade
That's
electric bikes out
fantastic.
there. They were awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so, hey, but look, I came along, I listened, had an impact,
Great.
went home,
Yeah.
wife sold the car, bought an
Look at
electric
that.
car.
Look
I
at
went and got an
that.
electric bike, and I'm riding it 3 days a week.
Oh, that's
So
fantastic.
just from coming to your policies
Yeah.
meeting.
Well, that's
I'm not
really
ready to
neat
say
feedback.
Prius, though.
Yeah,
I'm looking at one, but I'm just not ready.
no, that's
I'll get
that's
there.
fantastic because that's essentially our Green political party is born from an understanding. So our charter talks about ecological wisdom, responsible, appropriate decision making, social responsibility, and a commitment to non-violence and peace. Now, it's because we understand that the sort of degradation of people in whānau and communities and our planet today has been is the creation and the manifestation of an economic system that pushes ahead at all costs and ruins our planet and our people in the path of it. So the Green Party understands that social, cultural, economic, environmental issues are all connected. And so to address one of them, we have to address all of them. And our members, our grassroots members, have protected that kaupapa for us since the very start.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, as I say, I was amazed how simple it was
kai.
and how what you can do personally
Yeah.
to make change.
Yeah.
So, like, if I go and buy this plug-in Prius,
Yeah.
which I've been researching since I came to
Yeah.
that environmental policy
Right,
thing,
right.
it's something like 1/4 or 1/5 of the petrol that I just put in my car, which cost $117 on the way here. We're for 50 litres.
And that's exactly...
We have to make change, eh?
Yes, we have to make change. And that's why we should be supporting, and this is why the Greens will fight hard to support alternative clean fuels, to support solar panels for whānau, hau, marae and communities. That's why we need to support more people and subsidise electric vehicles. But that's why we also need to tax and have market regulation on polluters, on polluting industries.
Totally.
We're not shy about saying that.
Kia ora.
So, and this is the only way that we are going to address the big issues of climate change and inequality.
So on that, if I'm right, I think we were just talking about it. It's the first time in the Greens Party since you started. What was that, 15 years ago or something?
Yeah, 20, I think.
20 years.
Yeah.
And this is the first year.
Because first we were the Values Party.
Values.
And then we changed into,
That was before I was born.
yes,
sorry.
me too.
So Values, Greens, And am I right? This is the first year you're actually finally driving the policy
It's
tables.
historical.
So what we're talking about, you're doing this.
Yeah,
You're
we've got green
driving the table.
ministers. We have
Wow.
got green ministers. We have seen from Minister Eugenie Sage, Minister for Conservation, the largest increase in funding towards actually looking after our whenua and our bush and our water. The largest increase in funding in, many, many years.
Wow.
We've got James Shaw, my co-leader, but also Minister for Climate Change, right now asking New Zealanders to feed into our plan to truly tackle climate change and be carbon free by 2050.
Right.
We've got Minister for Women, Julianne Genter, who's also Associate for Transport, actually making investments so that our whānau can choose to use public transport and have less cars on the road and polluting our airways.
Well, we sure need that in West Auckland.
Yeah,
I tell
we
you
do.
what, you can't even get a bus down Lincoln Road.
Yeah, we need it
let
to
alone
be
on the
better.
causeway where
Yeah.
you've got 48,000 cars a
We
day.
need
It's
it to be
ridiculous.
better.
eh?
Yeah, so we're
It's
making
crazy.
those things actually happen, and we've got and this is why we need more of us. We need more Green MPs to be able to push ahead with those plans. We've got Jan Logie, our Under Secretary, leading the charge in overhauling the welfare system and making it actually a place that wants to help people rather than punish people. So these are the changes that we're finally able to influence.
Wow. And able to influence. So if we heard nothing else, able to influence. I like that. So you can actually action at policy level.
I mean,
how we can do that.
let's be realistic as well. There are 3 political parties who have to agree to everything that gets across the line.
Oh, yeah, forgot about
So it's ongoing work and it's ongoing negotiation, daily, hourly, down to the word and the policy.
And you guys all get along? Or
Well, we've
how
been
does that work?
our common ground
looks
has
good.
arrived at. Yeah, we have actually managed to agree on most things, and it's also important that we have the right to disagree as well.
Yeah.
We truly are an MMP representation.
And you look like you're in it for the long haul. 'cause,
Oh,
you know,
we have to be.
I'm reading the paper every day,
Yeah.
and you're not seeing the squabbles or the disagreements at any deep levels, and that's not for lack of media trying
Yeah,
to find
absolutely.
it.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
You're just not seeing it. So you're all sort of listening and
Look, we really want to improve things for the lives of ordinary New Zealanders, for the benefit of our rivers and oceans, for the benefit of our forests, our mountains. We want to make things better. We want to turn the ship. We've each got our independent ways of coming to those agreements of how we do that as well. But we want to make the changes that are necessary, and so every day our work is coming to that common ground.
Marama, can I just ask, because I think the current situation in the politics in New Zealand, we don't usually do politics on this show because, you know, people just think so differently, but, you know, from my perspective, it's a very hopeful time in the sense that, you know, you've got real experts owning the space of the environment. You've got somebody who's always been passionate about our elder people in New Zealand, and then you've also got Labour, which traditionally helps those at the bottom. So to me, it's an exciting time, but that's because I believe in those things myself.
Yeah.
So that's easy. But the question I spoke to Stephen about prior to this, and we were going to ask you tonight, and I felt like this when I went to the rally that we spoke about before, was that there's a sense that green policies are expensive for the average person. And how do you get beyond that for, say, people listening to this show who potentially are unemployed? Their last thought is about a riverway or the ocean, the condition of the water, because they're worrying about how they're going to pay the bill. So how do you
that's a really
connect,
good question.
from your aspect and the kaupapa that you guys hold,
That's really good.
to get that across to these families that do want to do better?
Yeah.
And that was the question I asked Steve all that time ago, and I'm still asking it today. But I'm very hopeful at the moment for New Zealand, more so than I've been in a long time, because
That's really
there is
good.
experts in charge now of areas, and they, you can just see it's just going to flourish. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So we need to understand that most families, nearly all, aren't going to be able to go out and purchase an electric vehicle or even an electric bike or even a bike. And so it's not actually about putting the pressure on individual whānau and individual people to help us protect our planet. It's about changing the system. And it's also about understanding that we need to, currently wealth is held by a few, and it's the many that have been building countries around the world on the backs of those many.
Yeah, that's right.
Our countries and wealth into the hands of a few has been created. And so the Greens have been very clear. This is why we need to redistribute wealth. We have always said we want to tax higher incomes and redistribute that to lower income households and families. So we've also been very clear that people need to have a dignified quality of life.
Kia ora.
Every single
Te ira
person,
tangata.
every single person, whether you are the cleaner, whether you are the nurse and the teacher or the midwife, whether you are the Prime Minister, everyone is entitled to dignity and quality of life. And so our policies have always been about making sure that tamariki are cared for, making sure that families have what they need, whether that's housing, health, education. Our justice system needs to be reformed. There are far too many Māori disproportionately in prison, especially wahine Māori.
Yeah, and recidivism on that too is about
Is
80%.
caused by prisons. Prison creates reoffending and reoffenders, and so we know that doesn't work. So Greens have always wanted to put more of our energy and resources into restorative justice, which has a far better outcome and well-being and protecting communities and making communities safer. But back to that very pertinent question, what is the connection for everyday people who are just struggling to pay the bills? And that's why we managed to achieve, for example, things like the power subsidy, where people will get help to be able so that our kuia and pakeke can actually turn on the heater.
That's right.
Without having to think twice about it, so that people don't have to send their tamariki to bed with beanies and socks on, which is what I had to do before I was an MP in a cold whare. We want to have minimum standards on whare so that they are all warm. We want to make sure that people who rent, many who are Māori, are paying fair rent for a decent, warm, secure whare, and not for a dive that is cold and mouldy. So those are also the green policies and visions that we have for ordinary people, because we also know that to protect our environment, everyone has to feel connected to it, and you can't expect people to feel connected to our environment when they're struggling every day to try and figure out where tonight's kai is coming from.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, good. All that. Well, we had one text in. We invited some people if they wanted to sort of ask you some questions.
Oh, kapai.
So Jason, one of our team, has texted in asking about the whenua. So for Māori, I suppose if I just recontextualise it.
Please.
So Māori, what have we got lots of? We've got lots of whenua and lots of people in different rohe all over the motu. How might the Greens be able to support, I suppose, from an infrastructural perspective around Māori reserve land use? So we've got these resources. How do they get opportunity? I suppose it's cutting through some of that red tape. We got the Turi. We had George Hamilton on educating us about the opportunities of the Turi Whenua Act and the Crown Mineral Act and what was the other one, Greg? The Māori Real Estate Something Act 1864.
Whoa.
So we've been learning about every week these different opportunities and how to leverage them. But that's was one of Jason's, particularly around whare, building papakainga, building homes, building factories for homes.
Yes, and so you might want to think about getting Minister Nanaia Mahuta in particularly, and there's many things I can't talk about publicly until they get to the public line, but I think she's been very, very clear that she is having a close look at ture around whenua Māori,
Really?
all statuses of whenua Māori, because what do we want? We want Māori to be able to have control over what we do with our whenua. And so a lot of those things are wrapped up in cutting through the tape. But also, the Greens have been very clear, it's also about giving the support, the resource, the pūtea, to whānau, hapu, iwi, marae, to be able to develop and use their whenua as they decide as well.
Kia ora.
And I think if we're talking about it in general, the Green Party philosophy of appropriate decision making means that the power needs to be put back to the most grassroots level. The most grassroots level and the most local level. That's where the concentration of power needs to be. And so what that means in terms of whenua Māori, it means that the Māori of that whenua are the people who should have the decision making powers, the governance powers, to be able to empower themselves for the visions for that whenua.
Yeah, so we've got Paul and Sally Wihongi up in Kaikwe. We've got Whaia Marama Day down in Wanganui, a Waiora Trust.
Yeah.
These are the things they're saying. They're saying they've got the vision, they've got the mana, and many other rohi, sorry. There's just two that I've been talking to yesterday, talking about how to do economic development into those regions.
Well,
particularly Kaikwe, where they've got such high unemployment. They're putting their hand up, so I think they'll be knocking on your door after tonight.
I mean, if we're going to get real about it, what we're actually talking about is sharing of power, and unfortunately, that power has been taken away from Māori at the most mana whenua level, and it was taken away generations ago. It needs to be given back. That's really what we're getting at, yeah. And that will take Crown, because what we're really talking about is what was agreed to in Te Tiriti o Waitangi, was maintaining the tino rangatiratanga that Māori have over our whenua. But that hasn't been realised. It never has. It went the opposite way. And so really we're asking Crown to live up to that and actually give that mana back.
And for those that just maybe listening in that don't realise this, there were two Te Tiriti Waitangi. There was the Māori one and there was the counterfeit English one, where they cut the top of the signatures off the Māori and put it on the English one. And that's where this confusion between tino rangatira and sovereignty. We never ceded sovereignty.
We never ever
so just
did.
Throwing that out there.
Māori never ceded sovereignty. Ngāpuhi certainly didn't.
Neither Ngāti Parau or Tainui or any other tribe.
Absolutely.
Oh, wow, interesting. So maybe just where to from here? I mean, we've canvassed a whole lot of things.
Yeah.
But one of the things I was really interested in is when Paris brought out about that climate. What was about climate and really pushing that? In some ways, I thought we should have led that. I thought Aotearoa, we should have been leading that.
Well,
not
you know
France,
what?
But
Indigenous people, certainly. So it is Indigenous people around the world who have been on the front line.
Because we were already doing it.
Yeah, for ages. And in fact, if the world had, instead of colonising Indigenous people, if the world had maintained Indigenous people's leadership, we would not be facing the damage to our climate that we are facing today, because Indigenous peoples are on the front line of resisting dirty oil, dirty pipes. The North Dakota peoples who were on the front line of resisting dirty pipelines, and all around the world, and here in Aotearoa it is the same. It is Ngāti Parau, whānau Apanui against Petrobras in the north, it's the same.
As well.
In Taranaki, it's the same. It's our people who are on the front lines of protecting the climate. And so, yes, the role of Indigenous people's voices in protecting our climate, the Pacific whānau, goodness.
Yeah, this is the plug. I think we need a more a Pacific Rim Indigenous tino rangatira expression, because that treadmill, they make a nice tune, but they don't actually translate. It's getting worse.
Yeah.
And so, my feeling of it is tino rangatira across different nations coming together on these issues of climate change. I mean, did you see this yesterday morning, that big chunk of ice?
Oh, another
that whole
fallen
plateau,
off.
which is going to rise sea level 25 millimetres. So, I mean, we were all sitting here in Tamaki Makaurau thinking we're okay, but what about the Pacific Islands? You know, these are real solid issues.
And,
so,
you know, just last year we saw Ngāti Whātua, the flooding down the bottom and the urupa down the bottom.
Wow.
So actually even in Tamaki Makaurau we're not okay.
Or Kahu Bay.
Yeah,
right,
or Kahu Bay, yeah. And so, yes, but certainly as our Pacific people have caused the least damage and are bearing the most damage and to their islands. And, you know, what they say, we are not drowning, we are fighting. And so we need to support them as well as leaders on climate change resistance.
Well, maybe that's one thing we could take away from today in terms of sort of self-empowering, you know. We don't have to leave it to a few. We can empower ourselves. Well, we had Murray in here, Greg, talking about biogas digester.
Wow.
Yeah, a sewage system that generates biogas.
Wow.
So you can put it on dairy farms to collect 90% of the effluent runoff, preventing it going into waterways. So I was at, and I only know that because I was at your environmental policy hui, where we found out you can't swim in 65% of New Zealand's waterways.
And how
so Murray was in here saying, I've got it. He's just come back from China with this biodigester saying, let's go.
This is the thing.
What does he do?
There are solutions out there. There are people already doing it, already working out. We need to support this initiative. We need to get in behind the leaders on the ground who are already doing it. What was I going to say? Oh, and you know, and it's just understanding that we've got to give over some power.
Some power.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. So, what do you do on a Monday?
Oh my goodness!
What do you actually do? Do you fly to Wellington and walk those? Ascend the steps and go
Most Mondays I'm in Wellington, especially.
Do you have an office in there? Or?
Yeah, I have an office in Bowen House, part of the Parliament precinct. Most Mondays, especially on a sitting week, I'm in Wellington. A lot of co-leader life, like a minister, is meetings. That's where a lot of our mahi gets done. It's where a lot of our wrangling on policy and legislation gets done in meetings.
So people are coming to those meetings around the table with different views, but ultimately you're forced to reach an outcome by a date or...
Oh, it's all different. Sometimes we've got a cabinet paper that we've got to agree on in an hour. Sometimes we're given a few days. So this is ongoing. This is the work. This is the job of being co-leader. This is the job of being a minister, is sitting around the table. And I have to say, man, we have worked through some issues where I've looked at something and I thought, oh no, we're never going to get this one through to all three of us together, all three parties together, and we've somehow found a way through. And it really ends up being, the cabinet paper ends up being a true representation of the three of us, because we've all had to compromise.
New Zealand First, Labour and Greens.
We've all had to compromise and we've all had to fight for our positions. And what comes to the people is a result of us doing that work in the back rooms.
Yeah, because I suppose there's some perception, and my wife Kelly was just saying before he came in, he said, isn't it really just a whole lot of blah blah? And you just sort of just sit around and blow air. And,
certainly is. Certainly is a whole lot of blah blah. Absolutely.
So that was a question that she wanted to know.
No, gosh, it is. It is indeed, and it's just part of the reality of the political system that we're in as well. We have to all do a bit of blah blah.
It's all part of it, eh?
Yeah, but we certainly end up making some decisions at the end of the days, and then the other part of the work is meeting with community groups and different people like yourself and community groups, and attending public events and supporting different kaupapa and campaign from communities. It's everything. And of course for me as well is constantly meeting with our grassroots members and branches around the whole country, checking in, listening to them, listening to the pulse of our core base and membership, because they are the backbone of our party and our movement.
Probably just as we finish up, I do have a question I want to ask about child poverty. I know it's something you've come out publicly very strong, and your predecessor, she did a great job campaigning. In
absolutely.
fact, it cost her
Yeah,
leadership.
it changed the government if we want to think about it in the long term.
So she did have a positive effect.
She totally did.
Put her body on the
Absolutely.
line. But
Yes, she
this,
did.
child poverty, it has been an ongoing
Yeah.
issue. And now I know we get to say, oh, it's data, it's statistics, you can make it whatever you like. But when you drive around like I am through the motu, and you are, and many other people are, you do sense we do need to improve here.
Yeah,
and
man.
where
There's
do you
really-
think we are at the moment? Where do we need to be?
There's no reason why as many tamariki today do not have everything they need to live good lives. And the Greens are very clear. While it is framed as child poverty, we know it's whānau poverty. We know that children do not
ora.
come without whānau, and the Greens will always be very clear about upholding that connection. The reason why it is sometimes framed as child poverty is because often it is easier to push children in poverty than it is whānau in poverty, which I despise that political reality.
Yes.
So I will always uphold that children are only ever part of whānau, whatever that looks like. And so there is no reason in the world, and especially in Aotearoa, we have got enough here on our lands for every tamariki and whānau to have a dignified life and everything that they need. There is no reason why any tamariki shouldn't be living in a warm, dry, affordable home and having healthy kai and having affordable health care. But what we're up against is a system that has concentrated the wealth into the hands of a few.
Right.
Often when whānau are in more than 2 full-time jobs, working incredibly hard on low incomes, low wages, working all hours of the week, and still unable to pay the rent to sometimes a very substandard whare, still unable to afford to pay the power and the kai and anything else that pops up. We know that is wrong, and we know that the system is wrong. So we have to change the system. We have to redistribute wealth. We have to have better incomes and raise minimum wages. We have to have living wages. We have to have cheaper public transport. We have to have health care that is easily accessible and available for everyone. We have to have good, meaningful jobs for whānau. And that is, we have to have education systems that don't penalise any tamariki, including tamariki with a disability, which end up, whānau with tamariki with a disability end up struggling because our education system has been starved for decades. We've got to we're trying to overhaul all those systems because that is what creates child poverty.
Wow. So look forward to seeing the change.
Absolutely.
Talk is cheap. We all know that.
It is.
It's substance. I like to say, I try to reflect on my life. Be the change you want to see. You don't wait. Be the change. Make a change.
Yeah.
And really, our program here, listening, and thank you for coming in and sharing with us.
It's been a privilege.
It's really exciting to hear what you're doing. Preserving and enhancing our environment and our whānau together is so important. It's the essence of us as Māori, but not just Māori, as Kiwis,
as humans,
as New Zealanders.
Absolutely.
So we, just want to tautoko what you're doing and advocating, and look forward to hearing more. And hopefully, I'd like to get you back on the program,
I'd love
and
to.
we can keep talking about some of these current policies and the changes, and what are they, and what steps are we making. So rather than about reading it in some third-party interpretation, we can get you back in and tackle those things head on. So kia ora, for those listening in, there you go. We've been talking about a range of things across Aotearoa, from whānau to environment, a little bit of policy. Be the change you want to see, is I think what Marama's putting to us. It can be small, it can just be one thing, or it can be going out and getting an electric bike like we did, or
Goal.
finding another way to do it, and to iritanga, to improve quality of life is what we must have in our nation. There's no excuse. We can have it. We're in one of the most beautiful, if not the most beautiful country in the world.
Of course.
So kia ora. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you, listeners and viewers, for taking time out to be with us tonight on Te Mangai. We'll be back again next week with another exciting program. Until then, you take care, look after the whānau, and have a great week. Haere rā, tēnā koutou,
Kia ora
tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora.
Ka kite.